Welcome to the NDPA Water Safety Podcast, where we learn about people's water safety story. And now your host, Adam Ketchmarchi and Laura Metro.
All right, ready, Laura?
Yes.
Oh, I'm totally leaving that in. This is just our opening now. So.
Oh, thanks. Okay, hold on. Is there a blooper reel? Okay.
For those that couldn't see it or just listening in, Laura, I asked if we were ready to go, and she's still chewing on something. I don't know.
Yeah, shoving food really quickly.
Yeah, that's okay. I keep her busy. So Laura, episode 6 now. Did I lose count?
Six,
yeah, okay.
I think.
It was 5 because I remember in the last episode I said I could still count on one hand, which was good for me. And now we're at 6, so now we're in really big trouble. Episode numbers are just out the window now. So
yeah, we got to write it down now.
Yeah, and I'm really excited because this is going to be a little bit of a shift from our past few interviews. We had Alyssa Magram talking about her background and working with Collins Hope. Then our past 2 episodes, we really have had 2 critical Families United members, really from the beginning of Families United. We had Blake Collingsworth, who's currently the president of NDPA, on episode 4. We just had Dana Gage on last week. And boy, it still gives me chills hearing her explain Connor's story. But I'm really excited because we're gonna shift a little bit, and today we're going to be joined by Pam Cannell, who's the Vice President of NDPA and the CEO at BoardBuild. And I've known Pam for a number of years now, and I can't think of someone else who is such a nonprofit governance expert. Her joining the NDPA board years ago has really fundamentally changed our operations for the better because she's put structure in place where we needed it. And for someone like me who has come in, to being an executive director of an organization, which I don't know if there's much training out there to be an executive director other than getting out in there and actually learning it. But I'll tell you what, one person I've learned a lot from is Pam Cannell. So let's go ahead and bring Pam in and welcome her. There she is. Hi, Pam.
Thank you. Pam. Really appreciate the good words. Good to see you both.
Adam, I wanted to add to what you were saying too. I think that, as NDPA matured, as, drowning prevention and water safety in and of itself has matured, Pam came on at such the right time to help the organization and the board and everything mature into being able to be, where we need to be to go forward in this space as we have. So, this whole maturity and these different levels of governance and the structure and the way that we run things, this has all flowed nicely into us, continuing to grow, continuing to up, the ante, so to speak, in terms of how we are moving the needle. So it's all been such a good progression. And I too have learned so much, from this, because we know that, running these boards, especially when you're dealing with such a passionate topic, I mean, we don't have anyone yelling at each other anymore in board meetings, which is really incredible.
It's a positive step, but I the one thing that I know we'll get to this in the discussion today is the fact that I think one of the struggles we see in drowning prevention is we're so passion driven that we sometimes don't take a step back and get our own house in order and secure our own foundation in a way as an organization. And I think that's, it's not always the easiest thing. It's not the most sexiest thing, and it's been a challenge for me over there. I joke because, Pam, I actually enjoy board governance. Surprisingly, I'm a board governance nerd now. I think Laura is still trying to make me a marketing nerd, and she's never going to win that battle. So I try my best. But Pam, so I told you a little bit before, but, our goal with these podcasts is really to get to people's water safety stories. So I'm curious to learn a little bit more about you and how you ended up being involved in water safety.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to talk with both of you. And as a a direct change from those previous podcasts. I can say that my experience around water comes from a position of privilege. And I did grow up with a handicapped mother. She had polio when she was a year old. And that is where she received all of her therapy, was in the water. And in addition, our family had a home in Cape May, New Jersey. So all of our summers were spent in Cape May. And that is where she and my father met. The Garrett family, there were 3 boys in the family, and they each had a beach that they were responsible for as a lifeguard. And that whole stretch of beach became known as Garrett's Beach. And of course, you think about the 50s and those romance of the summer, literally 13 years in a row, my parents had a summer romance before they finally tied the knot. So water was always a part of our family. My mother made sure that we were at the Y getting swim lessons early in life. I had 2 brothers. They put us through scuba lessons and put tanks on our backs as teenagers, and that's how we spent our summer vacation. So I definitely come from a place of both access as well as privilege around water, and that was a driving force for me as an adult in a community where I live in Fort Worth, Texas. We only have 2 community swimming pools. For a town, we are now the 12th largest city in America. We are 970,000 people strong, and there are only 2 community swimming pools. So unless you come from an area of privilege and you can either afford those country club dues, or, I love the Y, but there is a certain amount of money that you have to pay for membership every month, you either swelter in the heat or you go to the lake. And we know what, listening to Dana's stories and other people's from Family United stories around open water, it is just sad. So from my position of knowing, having had access to the water, it just seemed like, and being a master swimmer, I went on to become a master swimmer. I never competed in school, but in high school or college, but I do enjoy my master's swim club. And so knowing that we had people who had both the skills and the passion to help solve a community problem, that's where the Fort Worth Drowning Prevention Coalition came, and the idea came for that.
Well, so I have to ask you, because I already know this story, and it's one of my favorite stories when I talk about advocacy and making a local impact. I often get asked, well, what does it take? And it's starting, that's the number one thing I tell local communities now is you need to start a local coalition, because
Yes.
You need coordinated efforts in a community. And what makes it so difficult in drowning prevention is we are so siloed. This is such a multi-sectorial space where you have the public health, you have corporations, private businesses, you nonprofit foundations, lifeguards, the list goes on of every swim instructors, everyone involved in this. But there has to be some coordinated local impact. I mean, we can coordinate things at the national level, but there has to be a champion in each local community. And so I use your story as an example when I talk to people, because really this is what it takes to get something rolling in your community. So could you share the story of how you got the local government to support the coalition in Fort Worth?
Well, and I love that pun, that to get things rolling. So I was actually rolling with the Mayor Betsy Price of Fort Worth. And today is her last day. She's passing the gavel after I think it was 7 consecutive terms. She's passing the gavel. Wonderful woman who so much is involved in the physical fitness of the community. And so she has had what was called rolling town halls. So she'd like to ride bikes, and she'd open it up, and every week there would be an opportunity to roll with the mayor. And so I was rolling with her at the same time that Misty Vento's story, another Family United family had lost Xander, and that was very high in the media, local media, and Xander was on life support for several days. And it just tugged at so many people's hearts. In addition, at that same time, I was looking through the Sunday newspaper. That was years ago when we actually got the newspaper delivered. And I noticed 2 stories of people who had drowned. And just something made me go to the obituaries and look and do a review of the obits for that particular week. And there were 5 additional unique drowning stories. So that was 1 week in the summer of 2012, I think it was, of which there were 5 local drowning stories, everywhere from Xander, who was 3 or 4 at the time, 4, I think, at the time, to adult. There was an adult master swimmer in Lake Arlington that went down. He was swimming by himself. So it was the whole gambit. And I just thought, we can do something about this. And United States Master Swimming had just come out with the program where master swimmers can reach out potentially and help other people other adults to learn how to swim. So the idea stuck with me at that adult level. And so that was the proposal. I was just riding along next to the mayor, and I proposed this as a solution to what was a very hot button topic at that time. And she, when we stopped, she pulled in a couple of people. There was the chief of staff and the assistant chief of staff there, and she brought them over and said, I'd like to explore this. We got she opened the door to the YMCA. She opened the door to Parks and Rec, locally to the Fort Worth Fire Department, to Texas Health Resources, the local hospital, Children's Hospital. I mean, we had all the right stakeholders at that first meeting. And if I know this is going to be a theme through this conversation, but if there's one thing that I can say is, don't do it alone. You have got to do this by partnerships. That is the only way to scale and grow, is through partnerships. And every partner you have is taking your mission and moving it forward and getting additional ambassadors involved in the program. So it's just so important to develop partnerships and go for a coalition. Don't go it yourself. It just will not be scalable and sustainable by yourself.
You know what? I almost want to go back and write down every single person you talked about that she pulled in, because it's almost a checklist. If somebody wanted to start a coalition in their area, go to your mayor with this plan. We need to bring in this person, this person, this person, this person, and this person. Here's the checklist of the group that we need in order to get moving. I feel like you could get a better a quicker audience with your, local representatives if you kind of have a plan in place. So just even hearing that, I think, was incredible. And I want to actually add some links in after this about how awesome that is that she did the rolling town halls. That's just very, very cool in and of itself.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, when I tell people where to start, if at any point you can start at the top, start at the top. Yep. And that start with those decision makers. It is so very important to get them to create buy-in. And that's that advocacy piece that you had mentioned early on, Adam. And we still, to this day, we will, and we just had 5 city council members roll over in the past week, but I've already put emails together to send out to them to invite them on deck to see what we do, because you have got to get that buy-in from so many stakeholders. And that is the only way we're going to both change behavior in the community as well as affect legislation.
The other major piece to that is the story. You talked about having Misty's story that was relevant in the media at the time. That's where Families United members come in. If you have a Families United member or you have someone locally that can go with you, if you are not the person that has experienced this, that will get you in the door. Mm-hmm. That people will listen. They want to hear that story. If you have that plan behind you to say, we need to get these people together to do this coalition, that is a total package that somebody who is in the legislative seat actually can do something with. That is a actionable piece of a package there that they can really work with and do something with. So I think you're saying all these stakeholders as well. If you have a family that experienced it, often if people are listening or watching, they can look at Families United Prevent Drowning, see if there's somebody in your area. If not, call us. Maybe we'll know. But if you are not the person who has experienced that yourself, I think that's the other critical piece to that, is getting the feelings and having people understand that this is real. And what Adam and I always say is, when we talk about statistics, we always say it was, for you that day, it would be 5 families lost someone, and it's really important to frame it that way, because that is reality. 5 families, not because people just hear these stats and things and it goes over their heads. But when you say it like that, it is a bit more impactful.
Well, that's why I hold up these. For those of you just listening, I'm holding up the Not One More Story collection from Families United. And, politicians don't know what they don't know. And, I guarantee you, whether it's state level legislators, city level decision makers, or policy makers, and even at federal level, I guarantee you, if you ask most of them, how large is the drowning problem, most of them would have no clue. And maybe that's, our fault for not being better at educating them. But, I think what ties in here is we said this throughout the National Water Safety Conference this year, but it was kind of the concept of it takes a village. But even at the local level, I mean, you can't do it alone. And oftentimes, at least my experience has been, Pam, if you have one person who's championing bringing people together, most people will show up at the table and get involved. But you really need that one person who's going to formulate everything, get it together, and get people involved. I don't think in the drowning prevention space we're lacking volunteers, but we're lacking sometimes coordination.
And that other critical piece that I would add to that, Laura, is absolutely run your coalition like a business. It has got to be sustainable, and good grief, COVID just laid that bare for everyone, that if you don't have a good business plan, you're not going to get funding and you're not going to be sustainable. So those pieces of having that passionate story, having those right skill sets and expertise at the table, but also having that business plan, shoring up that foundation to make sure that you are sustainable and successful in the long run.
Well, I think that's a perfect segue to the other topic I wanted to get to, which was your background in nonprofit governance. Could you explain, for just a couple of minutes, Pam, kind of where your background comes in nonprofit management?
Thanks so much. I appreciate the opportunity again to just talk about what I just feel like what we're doing is such an important mission. It's so important what we're doing, but 2 to 3% of nonprofits will not last more than 5 years. And at that 5-year mark, there, so many of them are going to be gone. Again, it's another 2 to 3% chance to live on. So my experience comes from serving on numerous nonprofit boards, but while working for Leadership Fort Worth, just noticing all those boards that were involved, the nonprofit boards that were involved in Leadership Fort Worth. Number one, a lack of diversity around the table. You cannot serve a client base if you don't understand what those people are going through. You cannot have just an entire board of directors that looks like me, or, I hate to say it, but 90% of boards are led by white males over the age of 60. And that's a nationwide concern. So how can we bring those diverse skill sets together to really drive a mission forward? So that was one thing that I had noticed. And then also the lack of training. So again, exactly what we just talked about, passionate leadership. We have stories to tell. We've suffered loss. We want to make a difference, but if you want to get the funding, if you want to be sustainable, you have to have the training and know how to run the operation. So that came again from my background in nonprofits, serving on nonprofits, recognizing that there was a gap and what can we do about it. I am challenged by I have an entrepreneurial spirit. I am challenged by new endeavors. And so the opportunity did present itself to me to be able to bring those two ideas together, marry them, and develop this product that is called BoardBuild now, that provides both training for nonprofit boards of directors, as well as a pipeline of trained individuals to serve on nonprofit boards of directors.
Well, and I have to say, and anyone listening, please don't take offense when I say this, but as someone who is in that executive director role and is really responsible for helping to lead the board, engage the board, in the organization, what's I find difficult sometimes is we have a lot of good people who want to serve on boards. Intentions are good, but they may not have the background that we're actually looking for. And I find that a lot of nonprofits, and I'm curious if you see the same thing, bring on a lot of good people onto their board, but then they're not capable of actually moving that needle. I think that the organization's looking for, or helping to set that foundation the organization needs. And I think that, not saying people can't learn that as they go, but if no one's really driving that force to really get that education in place and lay that foundation for board members, you really end up with an organization that isn't really going to be able to progress.
Right. And a lot of people, especially at first, they'll turn to their friends. Now they're passionate about a mission. A friend may not be as passionate. They're doing it because they're your friend. They may not be the right person, actually. And a board has to be very intentional about what are those skill sets that they need. What is the working style of the people. You have got to bring that complement. Again, we're talking about partnerships, stakeholders. What is the skills and expertise of those gaps that are missing on your board? And I know at NDPA, we take that, every year we look at this, we put together board matrix and we say, okay, we've got a certain number of consensus builders here. We have a certain number of people who will ask the hard questions. That's me. I'll ask the hard questions, and then we'll look at the demographics and where are we missing? Where do we have gaps? And then skill sets. Do we need to bring on a marketing person to help Laura, or do we need to bring in a financial person because we'll be looking at an audit in the near future? Do we need to bring somebody on like that? So it's important to look at those gaps and skill sets and fill those intentionally.
I would say too, what's really important, and this is something I didn't do because I didn't know really in the beginning when I started my nonprofit, is communicating expectations in the beginning. Yes. So are they expected to donate? If they're expected to donate, how much? Is it up to them? Is it not? Are they expected to fundraise? Is this a working board? Are they, we need X amount of hours a month from you in addition to the 1 hour board meeting or whatever it is. If those things are communicated in the beginning, that will alleviate so many problems later on. And you will not have your sort of classic example of the same people doing all the work at the same time, and you sort of that resentment, running around, which happens all the time. And all kinds of, from the local PTA at school to, the highest boards that you can imagine. Without those expectations communicated clearly in the beginning, you're going to have a problem. It's going to be a problem, and it's going to be a lot bigger of a problem for you later on to have to try and fix. It might mean you have to wait out somebody's, tenure. It might, you might have to bring on more board members now to supplement, so if you're able to even get the basics, I think the foundational basics just communicated ahead of time, so you can weed people out who really aren't their best fit. That is one of the biggest lessons that I've learned with not only my own nonprofit, but also in doing this with NDPA and growing up in this was really, and also even with Families United, we are not a formal organization, but we have kind of had to formalize a bit. And I think it's, it's so important to communicate those expectations up front, if you can, as best you can, even if you don't know them all or have them all, as best you can. And maybe we'll make another list of like sort of the top 5 to 10 things like off the bat that need to be communicated immediately when you're starting something, because could have solved so many different problems I've seen in my own experience on boards over the years.
So there are a couple of tools, and Adam has these tools that I know he'd be happy to share. I have tools like that as well. Number one, in the recruitment process, put together a board prospectus. And in that prospectus, it will outline all of these expectations. Is there a give and get policy? How many hours a month do you expect that you're asking a board member to serve? What are the dates and times of the board meeting? If you're bringing on an educator and you're doing it in the middle of the day, you're not being inclusive. So all those types of expectations are front and center on the recruitment process. Then once you've selected your board members, you need to onboard them. You absolutely need to have a formal onboarding process. Again, this is where those expectations get laid out in that onboarding process. And then the last thing that you want to do before that, this is everything that's happening before that first board meeting, then you're going to have a board member agreement. And on that agreement, it's going to list out these expectations. It's going to be handed to that member on their first board meeting or right before it for them to sign, as well as a conflict of interest statement. So those are 3 tools that you can use to talk about expectations right before a board member begins service. My dog is lapping water in the background. I don't know if you can hear that. It's loud here.
It's all good. We love some sound effects going on in the background. And one thing that you mentioned, Pam, that I want to go back to is the culture of an organization. And I think there's 2 pieces to that, and that's understanding the culture of your organization. But I think it goes back to this point, because I teach in our sport management program at my university. So we teach, a lot of, I teach, understanding organizational culture in a for-profit setting and how important that is. And I don't know that we talk about that enough in the nonprofit world, because it's the same thing. You have to understand the culture, how people are working together. And because I will tell you, and I mean, even with the years of NDPA, we've had times where that culture was adjusted in the direction of not being so good, and it made it for some difficult times. And I've seen years where the culture is set, people get along, people understand each other, the way the organization flows, what the expectations are. And then you see it on, we've experienced years where that isn't the case. And that creates a really difficult experience. So I'm wondering, just your thoughts on that culture and how people should approach these nonprofits as a business. Because again, I think we get so cause driven that we forget what we're actually doing is it's a nonprofit, but it's still a business.
Still a business, yeah. And I am a little concerned, at least for the next year, when we all start coming back together in our board meetings, unless we've done some intentional team development over Zoom, we're coming back together almost as strangers. And so I think that everybody needs to keep that in mind as we come back together for our board meetings. So if you haven't done any of that intentional team building, then you might want to do that right away. Getting to know people face to face, you want to have those face to face meetings whenever possible. And NDPA is a national board, and so we only have the opportunity to come together once or twice a year. But as a board member, put it as a priority to be able to attend in person, and that requires resources.
On video when able. Oh, yeah. To attend, in not just listening. I mean, look, we all have had to be doing something else at the same time at one of the 12 board meetings a year. But generally speaking, if the expectation is known that we would like to see each other in person on the video screen, I think it's important these days to actually communicate that we want that to be face to face. And what you said too, Pamela, and you said, Adam, I think what people really have to understand before they go on a board is that, yes, this is a mission. Yes, this is a passion. But if you're going onto a board, then you are interested in the business of the mission and the passion. That's all we do. That's it. And so what I think we found in this space that can be a real problem with nonprofit boards is, now you're going to hear my sound effects up there. My 16-year-old daughter with the Vitamix, and then I have my mother's dog and 2 other dogs. So I've strategically muted a lot of situations here, but do the best I can. But is sometimes that passion can be almost detrimental, because in order to be in the business of prevention, and I have had a personal experience. If for anyone's listening, my son almost died from drowning. He was in a coma for 2 days. He made a miraculous recovery. We've experienced trauma. My daughter's experienced trauma. So I've had this. So I understand passion. I understand drive. I understand something coming from your bones and your soul. But if you can't pull it back and look at the grand picture of your industry or your space to be able to talk calmly and professionally about the business of your specific area, it's then knowing that in and of yourself, the board is not maybe the best place, maybe a role as an advocate or on the advisory board is a better case, or maybe leading one of the charges for that organization that a program that they put together. So really, I think as a board member, looking at the person and saying, what is really the best role? And then also that person individually saying, do I really want to listen to calls about budgets and marketing strategy? And, because that's what you're going to talk about. That's what you're going to talk about.
It's the business
and people
side
need to
of
know
what
that.
we're dealing. Yeah, it's the business side of what we're dealing with.
But I also want to say, and I think what adds to a lot of culture and for NDPA, we really look forward to coming together and hugging on each other. And that's because we make time for fun as well. So we are dealing with a really difficult, awful topic. We are doing business together, and it gets boring and it's not sexy. But if we can also intentionally schedule some time together for fun, and Adam knows with me that comes with a glass of scotch.
Me too.
Or with me, it's walking to get like a beignet in New Orleans or something. Walking or exercise. We've done that.
Fun into your meetings and schedule that fun when you come together. I think that's going to add to your culture in a huge way.
Well, Laura brings up a, great point. I know, in-person meetings are, great, and you really get to know people. I mean, I have some of my favorite stories from NDPA from just our board meeting trips. I won't share any of them because, but you build those relationships with people, and the one thing I want to go back to, well, 2 things. I want to just say real quick, props to Laura though on that video comment, because back when COVID first hit, our first board meeting, she said to me, whatever you do, the email that goes out to the board, you demand that they are on video. And we have had ever since then on our monthly board meetings, almost, I'd say 90% of our board members have their cameras on the entire time. And even though we're still at a distance, to be able to look at someone and have that conversation is so much more effective than a phone. And I mean, I think back to all the phone meetings we used to do for all those years.
Exactly.
And it's such a different feel. I mean, it doesn't replace being in person. Now I lost, I think, my other, point there, but I want to go to COVID and how this has affected nonprofits, because I'm really fearful because we've seen nonprofits really struggle through COVID. Fundraising has been really goofy through COVID. Our kind of funny, I thought, fundraising would just completely, go away during, and I'm talking, people actually unsolicited giving to a nonprofit organization, really not knowing what was going to happen with the economy over the last year. And We've fared, fairly well maintaining our budgets, but I've seen other nonprofits that have really struggled in this space, and I'm really concerned of not just now that we're through COVID, but what is that lagging effect? So I'm curious to know what your thoughts on that are, Pam.
Yeah, it has been extremely difficult, and I think a lot of philanthropic dollars have been funneled towards direct services and direct needs, and rightly so. It was, and there are still people out there hurting, and even in Texas, we went through snowpocalypse. I can't believe people are still out of their homes trying to get back in. So we had such a need for direct services. And for that reason, I think it's critically important that everyone be watching their budgets and pivoting when necessary. And good grief, I think Adam got so tired of us asking, we need plan A budget, we need plan B budget, we need plan C budget. But I know so many nonprofits that had never even considered what are the ramifications and what is that pivot point? What are our strategies moving forward if, we have to plan a contingency plan or budget? And so
Pam, I distinctly remember you saying to me and Adam when we decided we were going to put our entire conference online, good luck with that.
No, I was rah-rah. I was cheerleading the whole time. Way to go.
I love the idea of your budget, which is actually air and doesn't really exist. It's all nothing. But you two seem really convinced that this is going to work. So have at it.
For it.
Now we move the conversation to having faith in your board members.
And that's what I'm talking about is those pivot points, having those contingency plans. I think those, and that's a whole different topic as a nonprofit, how do you put contingency plans together? If you're not doing it now, you have got to be doing it because who knows the next time something is going to happen. So those contingency plans are super important as well. And now I lost my train of thought. So it's those pivot points. Right. It's looking ahead. It's strategy. Just keep the vision in mind.
And if you're not an executive director and, that is constantly thinking about contingencies, because let's face it, we are nonprofits. We're not sitting on, huge sums of money.
Right.
Most organizations, have a small reserve account, for, hopefully when times get rough. But your goal is to never tackle that. And it's not, it's not people's favorite thing to think about because, we want to think about, how can we best serve our community? How can we best, reach our mission? But at the end of the day, we keep going back to this point. It's still a business, and you still have to, think about if our, donations take a hit or an event doesn't do well, or we weren't able to have the event because of COVID. How are you replacing those funds, or how are you going to scale down your operations to weather the storm almost? And I want to say, it wasn't a fun exercise to go through, but going through that during COVID, opened up my eyes to, if and when something catastrophic happens, what is our plan? What is our, first line of defense to say, okay, let's keep the organization rolling, but let's make some adjustments to better sustain ourselves. Pam, I remembered my point earlier that I want to go back to, and because I think it ties in here so critically, is you said earlier, don't be afraid to have those hard discussions with each other. And I think that's something too we get super comfortable with in nonprofits because it's such a friend to friend relationship. You do truly become, friends with your fellow board members, your fellow, your coworkers, your peers in this space. And sometimes that can be an awkward conversation when you go to challenge someone, when you maybe disagree or you want, an answer. And, I've always said to my board members, please, ask the questions because maybe I'm not thinking of something or maybe I need to look at something a little bit differently. And I'll never forget, I think it was maybe your first or second year on the board. I'll never forget, we were in a board meeting in Tampa.
I'm wondering which story you're going to tell here.
But this is good. We were in a budgetary discussion, and Pam and I were on two totally opposite sides. And I know the story Laura's thinking of too. And it was
in-person board meeting. Yeah.
Yeah, but we basically, we're not at each other's throats, but we're really disagreeing with each other about the topic. And, that was okay. We were able to disagree, hear each other out, have a discussion. And I think some of the other board members were like, oh my God, Pam and Adam are really going at it. And then I think you had to leave early and we went out in the hallway and you're like, oh, you're doing such a great job. And you hugged me. And, it was all good because it really didn't interfere with the friendship. It was all about business when you're in that board meeting. It's what's in the best interest of the organization, not my personal friendship with someone.
I have to back you up on that with you, Pam. You have taught absolutely so many people, including myself, how to do that. And the tactful way that you do it, I think, which is a whole discussion for a whole another podcast, is as women, we also fear that, this is, that people are going to say, I hate to say it out, what a bitch or whatever, if we decide we're going to do that. But it's so important to show leadership. And I think actually I will give all three of us props. I think all three of us have done that for a couple of years now, of challenge each other in that meeting. And then, theoretically or otherwise, walk out and give a hug. And it's not personal. We are doing our jobs in there, and it's important to bring these points up. And I have learned personally so much from you in how to do that tactfully and well. I have to give you some props on that. That as growing and maturing for me as a business person on a board, I had to learn that as well. Also adding in, like we've talked about, the passion that comes into these spaces. You really need to be able to do that tactfully. And, you've done it so well. And I had to back Adam up on that one and give you some props there. That's such an important skill to get the business done and not have it sort of derailed by some of these other emotional things that occur.
Really appreciate those kind words. Thank you so much. One of the, every job performance I've ever had, I think I've been torn down because you're too direct. And I am direct. Yeah. So I really appreciate those kind words. But I think if it's delivered with respect, that we can, we maintain those friendships, and we are all good friends on the board. So I really appreciate that. I'd also like to throw into this conversation, and I don't want to take it down too far, but I do want to say, especially in the times that we're in right now, and diversity, equity, and inclusion is such a big issue. I look frozen. Can you all hear me still?
Yeah. You're okay, Pam.
All right. Thank you very much. Sorry. These are those hard conversations. When we start getting into those DEI conversations, they are difficult. And so they need to be delivered with respect. Number one, they need to be delivered. Don't shy away from it. But those, if somebody says something, and you're thinking something's rubbing you, you're just not super comfortable in the moment, well, try to think it through and try to back up that person, have that allyship with the conversation, and help push those conversations forward, because that is how you're going to grow as a board and push your mission forward so that it's inclusive to all people. And of course, in drowning prevention, we need to be talking about all communities. Again, those respectful conversations, and please do have them.
Agreed.
One thing, Pam, that I think is so super critical here is the point that, I've said this, I think twice now, is these are difficult conversations. They are difficult. When we're in a board meeting, nothing's easy. We're discussing about mission, vision, budget. You're looking at the overall health, long-term success of the organization. But these things are super critical, and I mean, I'm even getting as nitpicky as your bylaws, your policy manuals, as you mentioned, your board onboarding, having a thoughtful DEI strategy, and not just, we've thought about DEI, but how are you actually actuating it in your organization and into your mission? And
why don't you define DEI real quick, if anybody doesn't know who's listening, what DEI is.
So Pam, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you, just in case.
Yep.
Yeah, as I mentioned, DEI stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So how do we represent everybody that is our client base, and how do we include everybody? And that goes everywhere. That goes from the board to the operations of the organization, to the delivery of the program, to your bylaws. I mean, that's the strategy that Adam's talking about. So it's a huge endeavor for an organization to take on, but it needs to start at the top with the leadership and those hard conversations.
But I mean, even as far as, having a policy manual as an organization, and I'm not ashamed to admit, when you first came in, Pam, that was your first question. Do we have a policy manual? And I said, well, we have policies. I don't know if they're all in a manual somewhere. And, we wrote it. And I mean, it was a task to do that policy manual. We broke the board down into teams, and I mean, we really got it done. But I'll tell you, that was one of the best things we did, because now there's no question here. We've thought through, certain circumstances, how we would handle things, and everyone's in agreement. There's governance involved. And I guess my point here is, no matter which way you look at the topics that we're discussing today, they're not the most sexiest. They're not the most, dedicated, directly to the mission of drowning prevention. But if you don't have these things in place, your organization isn't going to be successful and set up for the long term. And really, that's what we need to see, is sustainability in these nonprofit organizations.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I wasn't willing to go forward without, after we got the policies in place, policy and procedures, was that strategic plan. And talk about not sexy, and talk about people not wanting to go through the process, but absolutely vital to the sustainability of Laura's glassed over. I can't even think about it anymore. But it's just so important for the sustainability and to get everybody on the same page moving forward. Otherwise, you are hit by so many different directions of so many great ideas by all your wonderful board members. But how are you going to move it forward? Because you're going to be constantly going in different directions.
So you're exactly right. But I quickly have to say, yeah, it was painful, but not quite as painful as the strategic marketing exercises that Laura Metro made me go through. I think we've done this, 2 or 3 times, Laura, where I've hopped on a little, and it's for our listeners. So I live in Western Pennsylvania, that is super rural. So my connection to DC, where Laura lives, is a single engine propeller plane that, tickets are $35. So I don't know what that means, but you know what? It gets there. It's an interesting ride. But I've done these day trips where I fly down early morning, come back in the evening, and Laura and I just dedicated a conference room all day planning NDPA marketing. And, I often laugh at Laura for ADD, pay attention. And the only time Laura's ever looked at me and said, stop, you're distracted, I need you to focus right now, was during strategic marketing.
Focus, Adam. Focus. He goes, what? You're telling me to focus? Focus.
But, same point though. I mean, from a marketing perspective, I mean, that was the start 4 years ago of what you see today, of what NDPA social media has become, be a consumer resource, the website, the branding, the conference, and the changes you've seen. It was all bore out of that. And granted, not the most, sexy conversations, and same thing, discussing it with the board, but such critical pieces to elevate the organization and have it evolve. So, Pam, before, I know we're coming down to the end of our time, I know I have 2 questions for you at the end, but I want to get to one other thing first, and that's, can you talk just a little bit more about BoardBuild, what BoardBuild is, what services you provide? Because, I think the services that you're providing are so helpful to especially startup nonprofits and young nonprofits coming on the scene, because you've really taken a lot of what we're discussing and really packaged it for nonprofits.
Yeah, I was going to say, before you start on that, was that anybody who's listening who is either just starting or that, don't get overwhelmed by this conversation. These things are done piece by piece by piece over time. This is not done in the first year of a nonprofit. Just like Adam said, when Pam came on, we had policies, but nothing in a manual, and that's okay. If you tried to do all of this in the first year, you wouldn't probably do any actual work of your foundation. So please don't be overwhelmed. Pam's going to tell you some more about what her work can do for you, but understand that what we're talking about is our growth and these things that we've done over time. And this do not get overwhelmed by this. This is something we've done over a long period of time, and then really got things flowing and moving. So I just wanted to make sure that anyone listening who's like, oh my God, I can't do this. I'm all by myself right now, and I just want to start something. It's okay. Like, it's okay. And Pam is also, what she does too, and her company does, is a very important piece here to help.
Yeah. Yes. And what we did is we took the essentials of nonprofit board governance. So if you're passionate, if you have a vision and you want to move forward with it, then do take the time to go to boardbuild.org and log in, look at our modules that and the description of what we have to offer. The training, that is where we make our revenue. The training is a mere $200, and it will give you all the basics of running a nonprofit board. And that is absolutely critical. If you are the leader, you have got to understand nonprofit board governance in order to bring a team together. And so that's where we start. The next next piece of the package then is finding those team members. And we do have, especially in the time of COVID now, we're all meeting virtually. So you do not need to look in your own neighborhood necessarily for a skill set. If you are looking for that legal person that might also have a passion for what you're doing, you can look in Kansas or Washington, D.C. or Washington State. And those people are in our pipeline, and everything is online on demand. So that is what BoardBuild offers, and I appreciate the opportunity to pitch it.
Real quick, I mean, that's just to, I guess, reiterate, I mean, it's almost like a matchmaking service for an organization to a board member. And what an amazing tool, because, and this is where I say, real quickly, because we go through this process every year with NDPA, you're always going to have good people who are able to serve on your board. But that's not the only component here. It's what skill sets do you need to elevate or advance your organization? And that's doing not only, having a prospectus, but you have to do that inward look, right? And actually say, ask some hard questions of the organization. And, I know this sounds crazy, but they don't have to be a water safety person. Right. So many times we're in that discussion of, well, what do they do in water safety? And, I know, and again, this is not meant to sound critical to anyone in water safety, but I'm at a point now with a board member, I don't necessarily care if they're in water safety, because we have a ton of experts at our disposal in water safety. What I need is someone who's a financial expert, someone who has done massive fundraising efforts before, someone, like Laura, and I'm going to use both of you as an example. When you both, came onto the boards at different points, we looked and said, with Laura, we need someone who has a true marketing background. And, Laura, was thankfully in the water safety community, and unfortunately due to her son's accident, but had that background in peace. And same thing with you, Pam. I mean, I know we're going to go over a few seconds, Pam. I hope that's okay. I got to share real quick, because you're on our podcast, how you and I first met. We were, this was back in, I think, 2015 at our first conference in Texas down in Dallas. And you were on the planning committee, because you were the executive director of the Fort Worth Drowning Prevention Coalition at the time. And I think my flight got canceled, and I was flying out like the day after then, and I was just going to hang out at the hotel all day. And you had heard about my situation, and you're like, well, I'm going to come pick you up, and I'm going to show you Fort Worth. Now, mind you, we were in Dallas, and there was no opportunity to see Dallas, because you said, no, I'm going to show you a better city. I'm going to take you across and show you Fort Worth. But that was, you opened my eyes that day to a lot of this discussion, because I really didn't know you, and you didn't know me that well. We were in the network, and and it was so gracious of you to, not, allow me to sit at the hotel all day. But it really dawned on me kind of where we needed to take NDPA in this direction. And it took me, I think, a couple of years to convince you to come onto the board. And I have to say, so thankful and privileged to have you as vice president, hopefully president here soon, because you bring that that nonprofit expertise that we needed to really take the organization to that next level. And I always say it's a team effort, but it's having the right team members to make it a team effort. And that's something I think we've been really diligent about over the years, and still are to this day. So Pam, my final two questions for you. What is one thing that our audience probably doesn't know about you, but you wish they did?
Well, and you set me up for this early, and I just don't have a great answer, but because I wish they did, but I guess that part of it, but I guess one thing that you don't know, and I don't know that you want to know this about me, but don't take me to 16,000 feet. I've been up there, and anywhere between 14 and 16,000 feet. I love a challenge. I'm an adventurer at heart. But I'm not happy between 14 and 16,000 feet. So there you go.
All right.
Yeah,
well, we have, and I don't think she'll mind me sharing this story because I think she shared it on the conference when she was on with us. But the one year NDPA, I think I was still a student in college at the time, had their conference in Colorado Springs. And Mary Ann Downing, God love that woman. I had to follow behind her the entire conference, and I think I saved her from falling downstairs 3 or 4 times because she'd get up to the top and be like, she'd look at me and go, I'm going down.
Yep, I can relate.
So the next question, Pam, or your last question is, so if I gave you a magic wand and you could change one thing in drowning prevention or water safety, what would that one thing be?
Laura's going to love my answer to this. I want one unified message. I want everybody working together in partnership, collaborating, same message, get rid of all these silos. We are not working together. That is why I believe so strongly in NDPA, because together we can prevent drownings. And it starts with working together in partnership, one unified message.
Absolutely. That's such a great answer. Well, Pam, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for all you do for water safety and drowning prevention. I know you commit hours to NDPA, and I know serving as VP and, like I said, crossing my fingers on the presidency here. I have a few glasses of scotch I need to buy her to convince her of that. But, seriously, though, from the bottom of my heart, thank you, because you make my job easier because you look out for the organization in a way that I don't know that every other board member has the skill set or the knowledge to do. So thank you so much for your commitment, and especially for joining us today for the NDPA podcast. All right.
Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, Pam. Take care. I'm sure we'll be talking soon. Laura, that's what an incredible discussion. I mean, we hit on so many different items.
There was just I feel like when I was trying to explain it earlier, when Pam came on the board, it just really felt like the time that we were growing to where we wanted to be and where we needed to be. And it was time to put this structure in place. And she was just the right person to do it. And I just sort of remember, I don't know if it was a feeling of relief, but a feeling of like, yes, because we had worked so hard, and you do that in the nonprofit space. You're just scrappy and you're just hustling, right? And it's not that we aren't like that anymore, but it just felt like we had gotten to the precipice.
We are for sure.
Yeah. Right. I mean, we'd gotten to the precipice, and that was the next major step to the next iteration of this organization. And I couldn't be more supportive of what she's doing, because it really, if you don't end up focusing on this, you aren't going to make it in the long term. And that's really it. And, it just really felt like this was the step forward. So it's just such an important discussion to have.
Yeah. And to close this down, I really want to stress this. I mean, the point of this podcast, and, when NDPA, we talk about nonprofit governance or nonprofit management, it's not to talk down to nonprofit organizations in the water safety space to say, look at what we're doing. It's because we know to make this sustainable for all of us as an alliance to really achieve what we want to achieve, we have to be strong at every single level. And that's the community coalitions, that's the foundations, that's everyone involved. And, you're only as strong as your weakest link, right? And we have to make sure all our links are strong. And it really starts with, as we've said, not the most sexy, stuff, but it's the most critical stuff to make sure there's longevity to our mission and we're able to achieve what we want to achieve.
Yeah. And we're opening up, in transparency, in a way, opening up sort of our story in general of how we've come to be where we are now, and where we're going. But, we're not hiding the mistakes along the way, or, again, like I said to someone listening, we didn't do all this, at once. There's been a lot of backward steps and then forward. And, it's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, frankly.
You don't always have the answers either. I mean, my God, I think it was probably the last board meeting. I think we changed or added, 5 or 6 policies and modified some. I mean, it's not a just you did it once and you're done. It's a constantly evolving piece. And that's, I think I want to go back to your point is you're not going to have all this in place at once, but it's how do you start building? And it's that strategy behind all of this that I think is so important.
Yeah. And it's hard to, it is difficult to take a minute to step back. And the only times, frankly, we are able to do it is when we are either away together. Frankly, I mean, if you're working on strategy, most likely it's not a day-to-day thing. It is something you need to make a day or two away to do nothing but that. And that is how you'll get it done. That's the quickest way you'll get it done. But it is overwhelming to think about it, to try to put your mindset in it. It's not going to work if you have an hour on Tuesday. It's something that is just, like we said, it's a day or whatever it is. If you have somebody that can guide you through the process, even better. That's the advice I would give there.
I'm going to tag one other organization that has helped NDPA out so much, and I'm surprised it didn't come up in our discussion today, is and I got to represent my local Pittsburgh area, but Robert Morris University, we've utilized the Bear Center for Nonprofit Management. Their consultants were fantastic working with small nonprofit organizations, and mainly because they're providing super high quality expertise, but doing it at a reasonable price point for nonprofits. When you can, we've had consultants come in, I think, to help build the policy manual, to help with our first strategic planning initiative. And it's really interesting because you're adding someone in who isn't on your board, isn't part of that mix, and can challenge you in different ways.
Absolutely.
We have some good stories from that, which I'm sure we'll get to eventually in the podcast. There's probably going to be a couple podcasts where it's just going to be me and you talking, and that could get dangerous. We'll leave it there. All right. So
maybe not.
Yeah, no, we'll wrap our 6th episode, and keep an eye out for episode 7 next week. Thank you, Laura. Thanks to Pam for joining us today.
Thank you, Adam.
Have a great week and stay safe out there.